experience, then the mourner is not alone, but has support and empathy. And one mourns a husband and father who was the rout of literally thousands. One is part of a larger community that mourns the loss of Zion and Yerushalayim in a very particular sense. If Talmidim are indeed Banim, and I am convinced that this is so, then my husband's biological children, who are also his spiritual children, are supported and comforted by their spiritual brothers and sisters for whole atar ba'atar. My mourning, however, has an additional flavor. You are certainly familiar with the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Ein ish met ela l'ishto, ve'ein isha meta ela l'ba'ala. Ein ish meta, me'an ish meta ela l'ishto, shene'amar, vayamat Elimelech ish Naomi. Ve'ein isha meta l'ba'ala, shene'amar, v'ani b'vo'i mipadan aram, meta alai Rachel. Elimelech is described not as Ishi Beit Lechem Yehuda, as in the opening verses of Megillat Ruth, but as Ish Naomi. And Yaakov Avinu tells his son, who lost his mother at a young age, Meta alai Rachel. And indeed, the lives of both Naomi and Yaakov were completely altered. One lost control over his family, while the other needed to take control in order to resurrect her family. Mourning work requires retrospective reflection, and I have to reflect on over a half a century of public and private memories, a task that is not easy. I would even suggest to you a task that is formidable. Freud commented, in mourning, it is the world which has become poor and empty. Retrospective reflection returns the mourner to the past, when the world was richer and fuller, and enables the mourner to integrate and internalize the experience and the relationship with the deceased differently, knowing that the past is gone, as is the person. My retrospective journey is not a solitary one, however. Many of you here tonight were partners in the events of long ago, and many of you were witnesses or participants in later segments of the journey. And I have come here this evening to join with you in reflecting upon the relationship of my husband, Reb Aaron, to the religious community in America, in the States. I would like to suggest to you that paradoxically, his influence here in the United States was greater because he left La'alot Arza than if he had stayed in the United States. Rosh Chodesh Av will mark the 44th anniversary of our Aliyah. At that time, there were many who considered our decision foolhardy and irresponsible. Our decision was a three-pronged one. The first was Aliyah, leaving the United States and joining Ha'am HaYoshev B'Tzion. Which good American Zionist does such a thing? I do not know what happens today, but 4 decades ago, Zionism was a sensibility that needed no practical manifestation. The Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim was a messianic hope rather than an imperative. And those who chose to implement that age-old saying were the exception. The response to our decision was one of surprise and shock. The second decision, an integral part of the first, was to leave Yeshiva University. My husband was a product of YU, and he remained loyal to it his whole life. He had earned his BA there, had received smicha there, had taught at Stern College, was a Ram at Reeds, where all the Ramim were then as now called Rashi Yeshiva and Rosh Kollel. He headed the first Kollel from its inception, and it was he who nurtured it, developed it, and mentored it in the same thorough and devoted manner that he was later to develop Yeshivat Har Etzion. And he left, knowing full well that he had institutionally burned his bridges, as he was told in no uncertain terms, believe me, in no uncertain terms, that once he left, there was no return. And the third decision was to join her Rav Amital at Yeshivat Har Etzion. Yeshivat Har Etzion, 44 years ago, was housed in several prefabricated buildings on the site that was to become, but was not yet, Alon Shvut. The place was almost inaccessible. The living conditions were rugged. There were few students and very little budget. There were those who could not understand how Rav Aaron had chosen this yeshiva of all places, a foolhardy and irresponsible decision without a doubt. And indeed, how did my husband explain himself to the perplexed? At a farewell gathering given by the Rebbe, which took place in Mr. Parker's mythological cafeteria, Rav Aaron asked the assembly, "What would you rather be, a spectator in the grandstands or a player on the field?" All of you who know him know that he always liked using sport analogies. I, he continued, would rather be a player than a spectator, as Jewish history is being forged in Eretz Israel and not in Chutz La'aretz. And a spectator sits and watches in comfort while a player takes risks. And so it was. If Jewish history is forged not only in the political arena, but also in the religious arena, in the passing on the Masorah in all its complexity and abundance to the next generation, then my husband Rav Aaron was a superstar. His yeshiva became the Gush, the place where young men from the United States, Canada, Brazil, South Africa, Australia, England came to learn, returning to their homes after having been exposed to his derech limud, his hashkafa, his musar, his hanhaga. And they brought back what they had learned and experienced to their communities, as individuals, as balei batim, as teachers, and as rabbanim. And they made a difference in their communities. Changes happened in England, South Africa, and Australia, where Batei Midrash were opened for returning students who attended local universities. American young men began returning to learn in the yeshiva during intercession and the long summer break, and the hegemony of 4th of July and Labor Day was replaced by Tisha B'Av and Rosh Chodesh Elul. The students became lay and rabbinical leaders in their communities. They internalized his Dmut Jukan. They sought his guidance and advice. I contend that my husband's influence was the result of the years that he nurtured and developed Yeshivat Har Etzion, not only as a Makom Torah for Israelis, but as a Torah center committed to offering B'nai Chutz La'aretz its very best. This could only have been done in Eretz Israel. I would like to suggest several factors that were responsible for this phenomenon. The first is undoubtedly my husband's continuing commitment to educating B'nai Torah from the diaspora. Many have noted his ability to present opposing views and to encompass contradictions. Yoel Finkelman describes him insightfully, and I quote, he, Rabbi Lichtenstein, wanted to explain that world to us from the perspective of Torah, a polyphonic textual tradition and canon which includes multiple voices. Rav Aaron wants to understand and wants us to understand the multiple sides of an issue, unquote. Rav Aaron left the United States out of a deep inner conviction that a Jew needs to live in Eretz Israel, but he was able to listen to the voices of those who remained where fate, destiny, and choice had put them. He listened to these voices, respected them, understood them, and was committed to educating their sons, and in later years, their daughters. And he went about doing this in his usual thorough and careful manner. Trips to the States and England to personally handpick every student who was to learn at Har Etzion were yearly occurrences. His entrance exams have been written about. They were an educational experience that had two foci, a logical understanding of any sugya the young man might have learned, and challenging him to understand and reflect about the world in which he lived. The second factor was the clear moral message that Rabban never hesitated to present to his students. His tolerance of moral turpitude was zero,